I'm going to preface this video by telling you that I am delusional. This is a mangled conspiracy theory mess that I am excited to share with you because my heart is telling me that there's something good happening because there are a million little signs that something good is happening. But it is worth noting that probably most of these signs really mean nothing. If I had to guess, we'll probably just be waiting for forever longer, just as been the case since I think 2012 when A Dance with Dragons came out. But I think over the last several months, and my cat Harry does too, because he just walked up to me, that there have been a number of small signs that there could be some positive progress towards publication for the Winds of Winter. And what I'm going to do today is go through each of those small signs and analyze them. I'll give the optimist's take and I'll give the pessimist's take to say, like, oh, this is how this could be building towards it, or no, you're just completely delusional. It has nothing to do with Winds, and Winds isn't ever going to come out. So join me. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. So let me know what you think in terms of the potential publication of Winds, whether that be this year, next year, in a million years, or never. We shall see. Let's talk. Now for some background. We haven't heard a concrete, direct update on the Winds of Winter for a couple years at this point. Our last kind of progress tracker comes from the end of 2022 on the heels of the first season of House of the Dragon. George Martin went on some podcasts, some things for his publisher and for different talk shows, and discussed the essentially progress he's made in the Winds of Winter. We know he made a lot of progress during COVID as he was locked away and essentially forced to write. And during that time, it seems he was able to complete about 3/4 of the novel, as that is the estimation he gives to all of the talk shows and podcasts and what have you. He mentions that he's about 1,100 to 1,200 pages done, which would have this novel being longer than A Storm of Swords or Dance with Dragons, so it is a pretty beefy book. It is worth noting, though, that we have no updates since that point. We have occasional mentions of the Winds of Winter, some of which I'll discuss here, but since then, we've heard virtually nothing about this upcoming novel. Some have speculated that this is a very bad sign. There have been times in the past when Martin saying nothing about Winds means that he's either not working on it or really struggling with it. And while this was the case at certain points, I wouldn't say that him not talking about it necessarily 100% means that, for reasons I'll get into later. The first little tidbit that kind of caught my and several other fans' attention was a blog post from March 11th of this year, 2024, if you're watching this in the future, which maybe you are. That would be cool. It is entitled Words of Wisdom, has a picture of a blue rose, and has a quote from William Faulkner. Dreams have only one owner at a time. That's why dreamers are lonely. His mood is set to contemplative, and he has tagged it as writing and dreams. This caught a lot of people's attention because of the blue rose, which is very much a symbol of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's associated very heavily with Lyanna Stark, who's Jon Snow's mother and Ned Stark's sister, yada yada. And I think that being a quote about dreams and tagged as dreams naturally brought people's attention to the next book in the series, A Dream of Spring, which Martin really hasn't discussed very much at all, outside just occasionally mentioning it when listing what he has left to do for the series as a whole. This blog post was kind of strange and raised some eyebrows. It reminded some, and I talked about it in my YouTube short, the only YouTube short I've ever done, that it reminded people of the Kong is Dead blog post from when A Dance with Dragons was published. But at that point, Kong had been the title of A Dance with Dragons in Martin's blog for a very long time. So this is at least a lot less direct than that. Here's my conspiracy brain take on this and on certain other things to come that's important to keep in mind. I think that maybe Martin finished or is close to finishing. I know he said in the past that when he finishes, he will immediately post it on his Notablog, but I can think of one very big reason as to why he might not, at least if he were to finish in the last month or two or three or so. That being season 2 of House of the Dragon. I think that if Winds were to be announced this close to the second season of House of the Dragon, it would overshadow the show to a massive degree. A Winds announcement is one of, I'd say, the biggest pop culture things that I've been waiting for the past decade plus. And I think that anything resembling it would just blot out the sun in terms of reaction to it. I think that Martin and maybe HBO would not want him to reveal this just prior to the season. I think we can see some evidence for this in the first season of House of the Dragon, where Martin did do some light promotion prior to it, but afterwards is when he actually gave the estimates on his progress and more details on how much he's written and how much he has left to write. We're also kind of in the middle of premiere season for House of the Dragon right now, and I think it is pretty interesting that we haven't seen Martin at any of the premieres. There were premieres, I think, in New York and in Paris, and Martin was not present for any of them. I know he's gone to a bunch of them for Game of Thrones, and I think for the first season of House of the Dragon as well, and his absence is kind of strange. It's not like there's a rift between him and the creators like there was with David and Dan in the later seasons of Game of Thrones. He is talking very much in support of House of the Dragon Season 2. He's hyping it up to all degrees and seems quite excited for it. He's talked about seeing rough cuts and really enjoying them. But it is interesting to say that he's not present for those. Like, I don't know, maybe people would be worried that he'd be asked about something, and maybe that would be a reason not to go. Of course, the negative take on either of those past two things being the Words of Wisdom blog post, which also Words of Wisdom, Winds of Winter, worth noting, I forgot to say. The negative take on that and Martin's kind of absence and him potentially delaying announcement would just be that it's all unrelated. He hasn't done any work. He's just bullshitting and just kind of saying whatever, which, I mean, has been the case in the past. But I think the number of small things that are happening right now do tend to kind of raise my suspicions a little bit more than it has happened in years past. Like, I've been in this fandom since 2016. I've had some scares. I've had some thoughts of maybe Wins is coming out this year in the past, but I think that recently the number of little things adding up has been a lot more than years past. And there are still three more little things that I've yet to discuss. Two of them come from the same blog post, that being one about Duncan Egg's casting announcements. It's a fun blog post. Martin really seems excited for this new show, as am I. But one thing that is worth noting is he talks about writing more Duncan Egg stories. And he talks about doing so after he's finished The Winds of Winter. He does so in very definitive terms, which surprised some people who assume that the series is never going to be finished, which I do think it will be finished. At least Winds will be finished at some point. I think that having that definitive term is good that Martin is kind of thinking that far ahead. Specifically, that he says he will write them before the show gets to them. If Duncan Egg takes an alternating schedule to House of the Dragon, that would have the fourth season of Duncan Egg, that being the one by which Martin would have needed to release a new Duncan Egg book. I believe that'd be coming out in about 2029. So, yay, wins by 2029. The negative take on that is he said the same thing about finishing the book before season 6, 7, and 8 of Game of Thrones, or I think specifically season 6, since that's when it fully surpassed. But overall, I think that he definitely seemed more certain in this instance. That same post provides what I believe to be the biggest smoking gun, the biggest red flag for me. That being Martin saying that he's going to WorldCon. WorldCon is a science fiction convention that I think meets annually. I'm not sure. I've never been. I'd like to go. But Martin has gone to it many times in the past. And the last time he went in 2019, he said that if he did not finish not A Dance with Dragons, The Winds of Winter by 2020 WorldCon in New Zealand, his fans had his permission to imprison him in a cage above a lake of acid until he did finish it. The fact that he is going back to WorldCon so many years later after that 2020 WorldCon was canceled because of the pandemic could signal something good. There have been WorldCons in the years since the pandemic. I believe there was one last year and the year before that. The fact that he is making an appearance and had made this promise the last time could be something positive. I think that I don't know. He could, but I doubt that he would like show up after making such a promise and at least not be prepared to address it with at least more of an update, maybe a sample chapter, or more likely, or maybe I'm just hoping for it, an actual announcement. We'll see. The most recent is the most tenuous in my eyes, but it's also quite interesting, as it is a rather unusual source, and I've never really seen anything like this in terms of just talking and leaks surrounding the Winds of Winter or other things. That being from an Instagram account, the name of which I can't pronounce because I don't speak French. Dumois. I don't know. But it was a submission anonymously sent, essentially saying that they were catering a book release party for a prominent author in New Mexico who had hired catering to celebrate the impending release of his long-awaited book. Allegedly, a big dragon-shaped cake is going to be served at the party. This is quite interesting, given the facts of that anonymous Instagram post. It does seem like the author in question would be Martin, as he is a prominent New Mexico author and pretty much the only one that I can think of. But the dragon cake brings some things into question. The main way I've seen people discounting this is saying, oh, it must be a party for the House of the Dragon premiere, which would make sense, would be interesting, but I'm not sure why he wouldn't just go to other premieres. We also know for a fact that he's seen the first, I think, 2 episodes of House of the Dragon season 2 on several different occasions. I think that, I don't know, having a dragon cake, yes, House of the Dragon, dragons, but also I think that that probably would be the shape of a cake for the Winds of Winter, unless you want to do like the dragon horn of Euron and Victarion, which would also be cool. But overall, I don't put that much stock in this one, but it's certainly interesting at the very least. I think that all of these things taken together begin to create a bit of a larger picture and a more positive one than I've had in, I'd say, about 6 years for this series. My thought is that maybe WorldCon, being the week after the end of season 2 of House of the Dragon, could be a site for something big. I think that maybe Martin could announce it either at WorldCon or before WorldCon. I know he has a panel in Oxford he'd mentioned, which seems really cool. I wish I lived in the UK and could go. I think it could be very interesting, and I think it could be a very strong time to announce it. Because I think coming on the heels of the show, it would very much kind of aid in furthering the message. Everyone will be so excited having finished the second season of House of the Dragon, assuming it's good, which I'm sure to some people is a big assumption. And I think that wins being announced on the heels of that could very much make sense. It's also worth noting timetables as well. When looking at the publication timeline of A Dance with Dragons, it was announced on March 3rd, 2011, and released July 12th, 2011. That is a period of 131 days. If The Winds of Winter were to be announced in early August, at the end of House of the Dragon second season, and around WorldCon or similar timetable, it would be, I believe, December 17th would be the date if it were on August 8th, the first day of WorldCon. This would make sense. It's right around the beginning of winter. It's right around the holiday season, which, I mean, I'd say that would help book sales, but I'd say this book's going to sell pretty well regardless. But I think that would very much make sense as a timetable, especially if Martin has finished it in the past couple months and just been editing and polishing and just refining it prior to the actual announcement, as A Dance with Dragons publication was actually announced before the book was completed. So the timetable could even be shorter. It's hard to say. But again, I'm delusional, and this probably won't happen. I don't know. There is a lot to say for the negative case. All of these things, if taken individually, pretty much mean nothing. And I think that there is a very strong case to be made that people have gotten excited about even more substantial things than this. People have thought that it would be released pretty much every year since, I'd say, 2015. And I think that this is no different. But I don't know. Knowing that we already have 75% of the book done, and that Martin has been very positive on his Nautoblog lately, if not talking about the Winds of Winter, just positive in general about other things he's passionate about. He's talking about Glidus and Alt-Shift-X even. It's really cool, and I'm really proud of those guys. It's just awesome. I don't know. I think Martin does seem more positive, and I think that is also something that should be taken into consideration, but I do think that each of these things taken into account individually really don't seem that significant. I'd say overall, my perspective on this is there's maybe a 40% chance of this happening, which I would say is the highest percentage chance I would have given Wins publication for any year over the past, I don't know, decade or so, even though I've been reading for 8 years at this point. Further evidence, it was revealed to me in a dream. I had a dream at one point a month ago that I was reading The Winds of Winter. The only plot detail I remember was that Euron had transformed himself into like a kraken or something akin to what was seen in the Forsaken chapter, and then Victarion had a chapter dealing with that entitled The Titan's Brother. But no, that's the best evidence on offer here. Thank you all so much for watching. What do you think? I know I'm delusional, but are you delusional too? I'd love to hear in the comments below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, all that typical stuff. I'll be doing a lot for House of the Dragon coming up here, but I am still going to talk about the books because I love the books and I prefer them to any of the shows, so I'll talk about both, I'm sure. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe. I think I might have already said that, but I'm looping things in my head, and I'm just going to begin to sign off here. I'll have a new video out on Sunday, probably just after the new episode of House of the Dragon. And before the episode, I think I'll probably do a live stream, maybe with Fantasy Haven. So join us if we do. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.